for posterity. So today we're going to be talking about using the taxonomic cleaning tool. It's fairly easy to use once you kind of get a hang of it and you know what it's doing. So that's what we're going to talk about today and demo today. So to get to the taxonomic cleaning tool, you'll start here in CCH2 as usual. You go to My Profile, you go to Occurrence Management, and then you select the collection that you're going to manage. So to use the taxonomic cleaning tool, you do need to have administrator permissions for the collection that you are managing because you're going to be making a bunch of changes to a collection potentially at a higher level. So your normal data entry technicians or students cannot do this unless you grant them those administration permissions. So you'll come over here into the administration control panel, and it is under the data cleaning tools under general maintenance tasks. So you click on that. And there are a number of data cleaning tools. There's one that can just find duplicate records. So these are pretty easy to use. You just click on this and it will list all of the specimens that have duplicate records or duplicate catalog numbers or other catalog numbers. We'll talk about this one later in a different webinar, but today we're going to be talking about the taxonomic cleaning tools. So there is just kind of a first pass way you can go through this is to look at taxonomic distributions. And that would be if you just want to kind of eyeball some perhaps misentered families or misentered genera. So you could click on any of these and say, oh, wow, that's a misspelling of something else that it should be. But I tend to not do that a whole lot. This is just a nice way to say like, oh, look, how many families do I have in my collection? You could copy this into a spreadsheet and then you could actually find that without having to export all of your data at once. You could just find a family spread here. But if we go into the Analyze Taxonomic Names, this is the taxonomic cleaning tool. And here it gives you in this menu, first it will give you a number of specimens that do not have a name that matches the taxonomic thesaurus. So CCH2 has in the background a big long list of names that are not necessarily accepted, but are existing names. And then for scientific names that are not accepted by this taxonomic thesaurus, they're linked to their synonyms or to their accepted taxon. So this is telling me that there are 289 specimens that have names that are not indexed, and that comprises 215 distinct scientific names or values in the scientific name field. So this tells me that I have 215 scientific names to kind of think about and decide whether I am going to assign them to a different name, or maybe they're just misspellings. We will see. So as it says here, there's a tool that will crawl through the unindexed names and attempt to resolve name discrepancies. And how it does that is it looks at your name and then it compares it to the catalog of life. So that's the current taxonomic authority that we have it linked to is the catalog of life. Our taxonomy is not identical to the catalog of life, but if you are ever going to run this tool, that is the one that you can compare it to. So I would say, okay, compare it to the catalog of life. And then if it can't find it in the catalog of life, or sorry, at first it looks in our thesaurus. If it can't find it in the thesaurus, it looks in the catalog of life. And then if it can't find that, it gives you all the options for what it could potentially be matched up with. Maybe, you swapped a T and an S and you just need to apply a new taxonomic name to that misspelled name. This will become a little bit more clear when I show you how the tool works. So we're going to say we're looking in catalog of life. Then you want to select your target kingdom. So if you're doing your vascular plants, you obviously want to select Plantae. And then you can also say how many scientific names you want to process per run. So if you're like, oh, I need to go unload the dishwasher anyways, you could just say do all 215 right now, and then you can look through the list. But if you kind of want to do it gradually, then you can just say, let's just do 20 at a time. So I'm just going to run 10 for now. You can also tell it where you want to start. So the goal isn't necessarily for this to be 0, because sometimes you're going to have scientific names that are perhaps not in the taxonomic thesaurus, but you want to keep. So these are like varieties that maybe were not published. And so you are okay just leaving them in there for now. Ideally, we would eventually put most varieties into the taxonomic thesaurus, and you can contact me or Jason Alexander about putting names into the taxonomic thesaurus. But the goal is just to try to get your data as clean as possible. So you can say, let's just start at M, or we could start at T, so I'm just going to start at M for kicks. And then you can use a fully automatic version, which is going to do a bunch of mapping in the background, but I always use semi-manual so that I can have the final say on what is being mapped. Okay, so let's click Analyze Taxonomic Names, and it's starting with M. And so you'll see it's looking in Catalog of Life. It didn't find this specific variety in Catalog of Life. Now it's looking in our thesaurus, and it won't allow me to take any actions until the whole page is finished. Okay, we did our 10. And so this says, okay, here's what we found in this taxonomic thesaurus that is similar to what you've already provided. If I say, yeah, I think that the variety is just going to be subsumed into the scientific name, you can click remap to this taxon, and that would change the scientific name of the specimen to just be, in this case, Medea sativa. Or you can just leave it there. Or if you say, oh, someone just put in the wrong, they didn't type very well, you can start typing. And it looks like we don't have any varieties of this species in here, but if you had found the correct variety, you can select that, click remap, and it would change the scientific name of that specimen or specimens to that scientific name. So up here in the top right, you can see that there is one specimen that has this scientific name, one specimen that has this scientific name. And so you are able to map all of the specimens with a certain scientific name to the new scientific name if you use this tool. So, and if we come on down here, we can see, here's an example where it found that scientific name in the Catalog of Life. And so what it did is it automatically added this to the taxonomic thesaurus, which is really useful for the future, because if we find more of this taxonomic name, even across the portal, you've kind of helped everyone out because we know that this is a scientific name that we're keeping in our thesaurus. So I don't see a good example of one that I would want to remap to. Have a bunch of, okay, let's just continue analyzing names and see if I can find a misspelling that I can fix. Not yet, okay, but I can show you what will happen. So if I open up this right here, we can see that we have a scientific name that isn't accepted. And they didn't find it in Catalog of Life. It looks like it's in Namibia, so that makes sense that we couldn't find it earlier. And say I knew that it was something else. Let's just say it's this for now. If I click to remap, it will say taxon remapped successfully. And then when I go to this specimen again, which I'm going to copy this catalog number so I know how to go fix my change. you'll see that it has changed it to this other scientific name that I had there. So this tool is good for fixing, like I said, misspellings or often, well, you can have a lot of different misspellings, but then it's also good for just bringing scientific names into the taxonomic thesaurus, and also just kind of viewing, oh, maybe we need to do some more research about this scientific name and see whether it's a name that does need to be added to the thesaurus, but just was not found in the catalog of life. So that can take a little bit of time. But again, like I said, you don't have to resolve every single thing in this list. It's just a nice, easy way to fix misspellings on the whole. Allison, you have a question?
Yes. Could you show us what the taxonomic history looks like in that one you just changed, just to see? I'm curious what it says about who redetermined it.
Oh, so it does not count as a determination change. So this is not a good way to batch change like a scientific name, like, oh, this is the accepted name now. All it does is it changes the field. There is no record of the change besides the date last modified and modified by. That's a great question. So if you want to, if we had a variety that was not accepted, not a published variety, and you just wanted to change it to the known for specific epithet, what you would want to do then is use the batch change or batch nomenclatural change tool instead, which would be an annotation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mike asks, does the thesaurus detect authorships that are different or misspelled? Oh, great question. So normally when you're doing data entry, you don't manually enter the authorship. It is just auto-populated from the thesaurus. So I don't think it approaches authorship at all.
Yeah, these would likely be authorships that were typed in long ago incorrectly.
I believe that when you import your data, then it will, depending on how you imported your data, it will probably map it and reassign an authorship. However, there are cases that will come up where in the list there, it'll say this name, and then actually, let me just show you this. There are cases where it will have this name, and then it will have the exact same name listed below. And you say, oh, but that is the same thing. Why were you not accepted? And sometimes if you click remap to taxon, it'll say taxon remapping failed. And I think the reason for that is that it already mapped it, but it kind of did it before, or it did it after it listed the results. So it actually did map, but it didn't say it mapped. It's a little bit of a bug, but if you see that, don't worry, just run it again and see if it comes up again. And it probably won't, because it will have been resolved in the process. And I think that might be what happens when you have authorships that don't line up. Anthony asks, what is the best practice for hybrid taxa? That is a good question, and we don't really have an answer yet. So we have entered hybrids as taxonomic names in the thesaurus before, so that you can search for hybrids that are, happening more than once, but they are very difficult. If you have a hybrid name that you want it to be added to the thesaurus, feel free to shoot us an email and we can put it in there.
Yeah, I've seen like a few where they'll enter the first taxon as the entry, and then in the notes they'll put what the other one is. And I was just curious if that's the way to do it, or if it's better to have both of them in the taxon name.
that is a good question. I don't think I have the answer to, because I could see an argument for putting at least the taxon name, because then if you do a search, you'll be able to find that taxon and its hybrids. But yeah, don't have a good answer for you there. That's a good community question. Any other questions?
I just ran a few in mine. There's hundreds in there, many hundreds. It looks like in most cases it's that it's a variety that isn't recognized anymore or not listed. But I was wondering there's some things I don't recognize the genus. So in most cases, what it'll find is something that was misspelled. Is that the main reason to run this?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That way, that, and if you find like, oh, I have a bunch of this genus that apparently is not imported into the taxonomic thesaurus, maybe I need to alert my portal manager that this genus needs to be added.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at these things that I bet they're African or something. So
Mhm.
I don't know how, I guess if it's the tree of life, it theoretically is fairly complete for all continents. Is that, or are you finding otherwise?
Yeah, I don't actually know too much about the taxonomic completeness of the catalog of life. Like we had a couple of examples of specimens from Namibia, and those were not found in the catalog of life. So I'm sure that it's just kind of a discrepancy of time and expertise.
I saw that in our collection, one of the weird glitches that would come up because of how the students would enter into the fields was that there would be a genus name that would get coupled with an epithet from like the genus before at the end of a sequence. And so I was getting these binomials that didn't exist at all, but they're like recognizable on either end. And so I suspect that I'll have some of those, and this would be a good tool for that. It's like, you know.
Oh, that's such a difficult problem to fix unless you know exactly what's going on. You're like, what does this, what could this even mean?
Yeah, and it took me a while to figure out that it was always at the end of the sheets for a particular species or taxon, and if it just happened to be the last species alphabetically before the next, you know, genus or whatever, and it only had to do with hitting a return or not at a certain place in the data entry, or the student forgetting to toggle a button or something.
Yeah.
It took a while.
Yeah, shortcuts in digitization can sometimes mean quick cuts to problems. One other quirk I found with the taxonomic cleaning tool is that if the specific epithet is capitalized, that like throws it for a loop and it can't find that scientific name. So if that comes up, what will happen is you'll have the scientific name listed here, and then usually there will just be a list of genera. And you're like, well, the genus is still Oriocaria or whatever. And so that's a good time to start typing it in here and finding it in that list if it already exists. So if this had said a scientific name that is already in there, you know, it says Mimulus gatatus, then if gatatus had been capitalized, it would just say like, well, I found Mimulus, but I have no idea what comes after that. You would just start typing in Mimulus gatatus and it would find it in that drop-down list. It's not a perfect tool, but it's very useful for cleaning up, you know, just dumb little mistakes. And the fact that nobody can spell Eschscholzia.
Or
Any other questions? What was that?
Or Cespitosa. You know, there are certain things that have two like equally acceptable spellings, I would say.
Yeah.
And so that they come up both ways, and if we pick one, then the others get rejected.
Yeah. All right, well, if there are no more questions, then that's our little demo break for the day. I will hang on if anyone has any other random questions that have come up. And I will see you next month. It will be, let's see, October 6th, same time, same place, Wednesday at noon.